"You can't escape what's coming," he said before I even realized he was there. Rain pounded against the cracked pavement, each drop splattering against the windshield like tiny hammers as Emily Carter gripped the steering wheel of her aged Honda, knuckles white, heart thudding in her chest. The streets of Manhattan blurred through the rain-streaked glass, neon signs melting into streaks of color, the hum of distant traffic barely audible over the storm. She had been running late, distracted by a missed call, and suddenly the world tilted sideways as her tires skidded on slick asphalt, spinning her toward the curb where a sleek black SUV had pulled to a stop. Doors opened, and Derek Blackwell emerged, tall, angular, exuding an aura of authority that seemed to push the rain aside, his ice-blue eyes fixed on her as if he could see straight into her racing thoughts. Emily's breath hitched, her instincts screaming to flee, but every path was blocked by his presence. And yet there was a strange stillness, a pause in the chaos that made the world feel like it had narrowed down to just him and her. She pressed her foot on the brake, but the Honda's tires protested, squealing on wet asphalt, and in that heartbeat, Derek's hand lifted slightly, a signal of control, a gesture that was almost hypnotic. She tried to speak, words catching in her throat dry, eyes wide, and he simply stepped closer, the rain clinging to the folds of his tailored black coat, droplets sliding off like liquid silk. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, and terrifyingly calm. The city lights reflected off his polished shoes and the hard line of his jaw, the way he held himself radiating a power Emily had only read about in whispered rumors. She felt small, fragile, a human flicker in the storm, and yet there was an undeniable pull, a tension that rooted her to the spot. "Emily," he said, her name slicing through the patter of rain, low, controlled, carrying weight she couldn't define but felt in her bones. "You're exactly where you're meant to be." Her heart raced faster, a mix of fear and a pulse of curiosity she didn't understand, and she realized in that instant that whatever had begun in this stormy intersection was just the first note of a story that would pull her into a world far beyond her ordinary life. The SUV's lights glimmered behind him, shadows dancing across the wet asphalt, and she felt the magnitude of the moment, the sense that her next choice, her next movement, would echo far beyond the narrow streets of Manhattan. The rain blurred everything but his figure, his presence solid, unyielding, and Emily's instinct to escape warred with an inexplicable fascination. Her pulse thrummed like a drum, matching the rhythm of the storm, and in the tense silence between raindrops, she heard him again, softer this time, yet just as commanding. "You can't run from this," and the words wrapped around her mind, tethering her to the space between fear and curiosity, a place where destiny had just stepped off the curb and into her life, leaving her no choice but to follow. Emily Carter stumbled backward as Derek Blackwell extended a hand, the rain splashing across her jacket, soaking her hair and pressing it against her cheeks. His eyes never wavered from hers, and in that moment, the city around them seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of water hitting metal and the faint hum of distant traffic. She hesitated, heart hammering in her chest, torn between flight and the pull of his presence, an unspoken command woven into the tension of his gaze. Step by step, he guided her to the sidewalk, his movements calm, deliberate, measured, every inch of him radiating control without a word. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for her keys, but Derek's voice, smooth and even, stopped her. "Do not worry about your car right now." And there was a softness there that contrasted with the hard edge of his eyes. She glanced at the SUV, the sleek vehicle reflecting city lights like liquid glass, and realized it was not just a mode of transport, but a statement of the world Derek inhabited, one she was only beginning to glimpse. They walked together through the rain-slicked streets, the muffled sounds of the city wrapping around them, and she became aware of how small her steps felt next to his confident stride. Every shadow seemed to bend toward him, every glimmer of neon highlighting the sharp angles of his face and the deliberate rhythm of his movements. Emily's mind raced with questions, curiosity battling caution as she studied him, noting the subtle tension in his shoulders, the faint scent of cologne mixed with rain, the way his eyes held hers as if measuring the weight of her thoughts. "Where are we going?" she finally whispered, voice barely audible over the storm. Derek's lips curved slightly, a hint of a smile that did not reach the intensity of his gaze. "Somewhere you will see things differently," he replied, and she felt the gravity of his words settle like the wetness on her skin, heavy and inescapable. As they turned the corner, the streetlights reflected in puddles, creating a kaleidoscope of gold and gray under her feet, and she realized that she had stepped into a story far larger than her own, a narrative woven with decisions she did not yet understand, and yet could not deny. Derek paused at the entrance of a modern building, glass doors glinting with the reflection of storm clouds, and opened one with deliberate care, gesturing for Emily to enter. She hesitated at the threshold, feeling the pulse of anticipation, the shift in the air from open street to structured interior, and as she crossed it, she caught a glimpse of a world meticulously arranged, hints of power and precision visible in the quiet hum of the lobby and the subtle watchfulness of those inside. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the rain outside, fast and uncertain, and she took a deep breath, the scent of polished floors and fresh air mixing with the residual aroma of the storm, bracing herself for the first steps into a realm that was equal parts enigmatic and commanding. Derek's hand remained near hers, a silent assurance rather than constraint, and Emily realized that while she had entered this building at his invitation, the journey she was about to undertake was as much about discovery as it was about destiny, every step forward carrying the weight of choice and consequence, every glance between them a promise that the story had only just begun. Emily Carter stepped further into the building, the warm air a stark contrast to the rain-soaked streets she had just left, and every detail around her felt meticulously arranged, polished surfaces reflecting the faint glow of overhead lighting, soft hums of electronics punctuating the quiet. Derek Blackwell moved beside her, silent and poised, his presence commanding attention even without a single word, and she could not help but notice the subtle way his eyes scanned the lobby, noting every movement, every shadow, every shift in light. Her shoes clicked lightly against the marble floor, each step echoing faintly, and the tension in her chest was a mix of anticipation and uncertainty as she followed him past the sleek reception desk, where a woman in crisp attire offered a polite nod, eyes quickly returning to her screen. The scent of polished wood, faint leather, and a hint of cologne lingered in the air, grounding Emily even as her mind raced with questions about the world she had stepped into. Derek opened a door to a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, rain still dripping in streaks from their entrance, and sunlight glimmered through the clouds breaking overhead, painting the wet streets below in a spectrum of muted gold and gray. Emily paused for a brief moment, taking in the contrast between the controlled elegance of the interior and the chaotic city beyond, feeling the weight of her decision to follow him into this unknown space. As they continued down the corridor, she noticed subtle details, the quiet efficiency of staff moving with purpose, the soft hum of security systems, and the way every door, every panel, every fixture suggested order and control, a reflection of Derek himself. Her pulse quickened not from fear, but from the realization that she was part of a story unfolding in real time, a story that was bigger, more intricate, and more powerful than anything she had experienced. At the end of the hall, Derek paused, his gaze shifting briefly to her, giving her a faint nod of reassurance that was both commanding and strangely comforting. The doors ahead opened to a large, open room, high ceilings with modern lighting, artwork carefully curated along the walls, and a sense of quiet authority permeating the space. Emily stepped inside, absorbing the details, feeling the subtle shift in energy as she moved from the controlled hallway into the broader space, where power and precision were tangible in every object, every sound. Derek gestured to a seat near a large window overlooking the city skyline, and she took it, noting how natural his movements were, confident yet measured. Rain continued to streak the glass behind them, the city lights flickering and reflecting off the wet surfaces, casting a soft glow across the room. Emily could hear her own breathing, steady but laced with anticipation, and she sensed the careful observation in Derek's posture, the subtle calculation in every glance, as though he could see not only her outward composure, but the questions and curiosity swirling behind her eyes. "You will understand more than what meets the eye tonight," he said softly, voice low and controlled, carrying a weight that seemed to anchor her thoughts even as her mind spun with wonder. The air between them held a quiet intensity, a balance of authority and restraint, and Emily realized that while she had entered this room at his invitation, the unfolding moments would reveal truths she had never imagined, every second pulling her deeper into a world of precision, control, and the undeniable pull of destiny that had brought them together. Emily Carter shifted slightly in her seat, the soft padding beneath her a stark contrast to the hardness of the marble floors she had walked across moments before, and the city stretched out beneath the window in a mosaic of wet streets and shimmering lights, blurred by the lingering drizzle. Derek Blackwell remained standing nearby, his posture relaxed but commanding, every movement precise, every glance intentional, and Emily could not ignore the way the faint glow of the skyline reflected in his sharp features, highlighting the ice blue of his eyes and the controlled strength in the set of his jaw. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional drip from the overhanging eaves outside, a rhythm that seemed to match the pulse of anticipation building within her. She caught herself studying the details of the space, sleek furniture arranged with meticulous care, lighting angled to accentuate the room's breadth without overwhelming it, and subtle touches of luxury that spoke of taste and control rather than extravagance. Her fingers traced the edge of the polished table as she absorbed everything, the warmth of the indoor air mixing with the faint residual chill from the storm outside, grounding her in the moment even as her mind raced with questions about the man beside her and the world he inhabited. Derek finally spoke, his voice low, measured, and carrying a weight that drew her attention entirely. "You are here because you need to see more than what is apparent," he said, and she felt the subtle shift in energy, a pull toward understanding something larger, something carefully concealed but now within reach. Emily's pulse quickened as he gestured toward a series of photographs and documents neatly laid out on a side console, each one hinting at a world of strategy, precision, and influence that extended far beyond the city streets she knew. She leaned forward, curiosity and apprehension mingling as she examined the details, noting patterns and connections that suggested careful planning, foresight, and the subtle exercise of power without overt assertion, a dance of authority that commanded respect without a single raised voice. Derek's gaze followed hers, quiet and unyielding, yet there was a softness that allowed her space to breathe, to consider, to engage with the complexity before her, and in that moment, Emily realized that she was witnessing the contours of a life lived with absolute awareness, where every decision carried consequence and every interaction was carefully calibrated. The faint scent of rain lingered at the edges of the room, mingling with the subtle aroma of polished wood and leather, anchoring her senses even as her mind swirled with new understanding. She straightened, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight and significance of the encounter, aware that this was only the beginning of a journey into a world simultaneously foreign and magnetic, a world where control and care coexisted, and where her presence had already begun to stir ripples she could neither fully comprehend nor resist. Derek's hand moved slightly, a subtle, unspoken invitation to continue observing, to step deeper into the unfolding story, and Emily's heart responded in kind, a mix of anticipation and recognition that the path ahead was as enigmatic as it was compelling, and that every choice from this point forward would be entwined with the man who had guided her to this moment. Emily Carter followed Derek Blackwell deeper into the expansive space, each step echoing softly against the polished marble floor, the ambient lighting casting subtle shadows that accentuated the sharp lines of the modern architecture. Rain still tapped against the high windows, the sound of distant percussion beneath the quiet hum of the building, and Emily could not help but notice the careful arrangement of every object around her, from sleek furniture to understated artwork, each element reflecting a life ruled by precision and intention. Derek moved beside her with the ease of someone completely familiar with every detail of the environment, his gaze sweeping the room before resting briefly on her, a steady and calculated focus that made her aware of both her presence and her reactions. She felt a mixture of curiosity and apprehension as he guided her to a seating area overlooking the city below. The skyline spread out like a living tapestry, lights shimmering on the wet streets, a quiet reminder of the world beyond these walls. Derek gestured toward a set of documents and a digital display on a side table, and Emily approached, the soft click of her shoes on the floor blending with the faint hum of electronics, her fingers tracing the edges of the materials as she studied them. Each piece seemed to reveal a story of careful planning and strategy, a web of connections and decisions that hinted at influence and responsibility handled with exacting control. She noted the subtle details, the alignment of furniture, the precision in the lighting, the minimalistic decor that spoke of discipline rather than extravagance, and felt the weight of entering a world meticulously ordered, a space where choices carried consequence and observation was a tool of understanding. Derek remained silent, his presence a constant reminder of the authority embedded in this place. Yet there was no rush, only a measured patience that allowed Emily to absorb the complexity around her, to consider what each element signified, and to process the impact of stepping into a life so deliberate and exact. The air was tinged with the faint scent of polished wood and subtle cologne, grounding her senses even as her mind traced the layers of meaning in the environment and the person guiding her through it. She realized that every glance Derek cast, every subtle shift in his posture, carried intention and observation, a quiet assurance of control paired with an expectation of engagement and awareness from her. As she moved between the displays, noting patterns and connections, she felt the tension of curiosity interwoven with respect, a recognition of the scale and scope of the decisions represented in the documents and the calculated precision in the space itself. Derek's voice finally broke the quiet, low and deliberate. There is more to see than what appears at first glance, and Emily felt the words settle into her consciousness, a reminder that her journey through this world was just beginning. Each observation a step toward understanding the intricacies and responsibility that came with proximity to the power she now encountered, and with that understanding, a quiet anticipation for what each next step would reveal, every movement of the storm. Outside, echoing the rhythm of her own unfolding awareness and the slow, deliberate pace of discovery. Emily Carter felt a shift in the atmosphere as Derek Blackwell guided her further into the space, the soft hum of the building wrapping around them like a quiet cloak of expectation. The lighting dimmed slightly as they moved into a hallway lined with tall windows, rain streaking down the glass in vertical lines, blurring the city lights into abstract ribbons of gold and gray. She noticed the subtle precision in every detail, the alignment of furniture, the placement of decorative objects, the careful calibration of light and shadow, and it created a sense of order that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the storm outside. Derek walked with a composed grace, each step deliberate, his presence commanding yet restrained, and Emily could not help but feel the weight of being observed, measured, understood without words. Her hands clutched the strap of her bag as she followed him, each click of her shoes on the polished floors echoing softly, mingling with the quiet rhythm of the building. The hallway opened into a larger room, high ceilings, minimalist design, subtle accents of luxury, and the view of the city stretched out beyond the windows, the wet streets reflecting lights like liquid glass. Derek stopped, turning slightly to study her reaction, and Emily felt the tension and anticipation coil in her chest, an invisible thread connecting her attention to his presence. He gestured toward a console displaying documents and photographs, each meticulously organized, and she stepped closer, her curiosity battling with a cautious awareness of the power surrounding her. The faint scent of leather and polished wood filled the air, mingling with the residual moisture from the storm outside, grounding her senses even as her mind processed the new environment. Derek's voice, low and deliberate, broke the silence. Observation is the first step toward understanding, and she absorbed the weight of his words, recognizing the layers of strategy, precision, and care embedded in every detail she saw. Emily traced her eyes across the materials, noticing patterns and connections, the rhythm of decisions and consequences laid out before her, and she realized that every choice, every glance, every subtle motion in this space was part of a larger narrative she was only beginning to understand. The quiet intensity of Derek's presence made her keenly aware of her own reactions, thoughts, and instincts, and she felt a delicate balance between apprehension and engagement, a recognition that the unfolding moments were both a test and an invitation. As the rain continued its steady fall outside, casting reflections across the floors and walls, Emily felt the pull of the world Derek inhabited, the meticulous attention to detail, the quiet assertion of control, and the unspoken understanding that her own perspective and decisions would shape how she navigated this space. Each breath, each movement was measured against the backdrop of precision, power, and silent expectation, and she realized that her journey into this realm was far from over, each step drawing her deeper into a story that demanded attention, awareness, and the courage to embrace the unknown, a story where every moment was charged with potential, and the path forward was illuminated not just by the lights of the city, but by the subtle guidance of the man walking beside her. Emily Carter felt a subtle shift in the energy around her as Derek Blackwell led her into a room filled with floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights below flickering like scattered stars through the remnants of rain. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint scent of polished wood and distant ozone, and she realized the space was designed not just for function, but for observation, reflection, and quiet authority. Derek moved with a careful precision, opening a sleek door to reveal a private lounge area with minimalist furniture arranged to create both openness and focus, soft lighting highlighting the contours of the room without being intrusive. Emily took a slow step inside, her eyes tracing the edges of the furniture, the subtle interplay of light and shadow, and the art on the walls that suggested deliberate choice, each piece telling a story without needing explanation. She could hear her own breathing and the faint hum of the building's climate system, a rhythm that somehow synchronized with the quiet intensity she felt in Derek's presence. He stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, observing her reaction with a calm yet compelling scrutiny that made her aware of every motion she made, every hesitation, every subtle adjustment in posture. Her pulse quickened as she approached the seating area, each step measured and conscious, the soft click of her shoes on the polished floor echoing faintly in the stillness. Derek finally spoke, voice low, deliberate, carrying authority without demanding it. "Everything you see here has purpose, Emily. Every choice, every detail, is part of a system you are only beginning to understand." She nodded, unable to tear her eyes away from the city below, the scale of it both grounding and humbling, the perspective shifting her awareness of how small her own world had been until this point. As she settled into the chair, she felt the quiet tension of being observed, the awareness that her presence was significant, and yet there was a gentle patience in his gaze that allowed her to explore, to absorb, to comprehend at her own pace. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, soft streaks on the glass casting subtle patterns across the floor, and Emily became conscious of the interplay between the controlled interior and the untamed city beyond. Derek walked slowly around the room, each movement deliberate, an unspoken lesson in composure and observation, and she realized that this was more than a physical space. It was a reflection of the discipline, control, and perspective he carried into every aspect of his life. Her mind traced the subtle cues, the positioning of objects, the soft ambient lighting, the careful arrangement of space, all echoing a story of deliberate design, thoughtful strategy, and quiet command. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her chest ease slightly as she absorbed the weight of the environment and the presence of the man guiding her, understanding that the moments ahead would be defined not only by the choices she made, but by the awareness, attentiveness, and reflection she brought into this room, each heartbeat a measure of her growing comprehension and engagement with the world Derek had revealed. Emily Carter shifted her weight slightly in the chair, the soft upholstery barely giving beneath her as the city lights outside shimmered through the tall windows, rain still streaking the glass in delicate lines. Derek Blackwell remained standing nearby, his gaze moving smoothly from the view beyond to her, analyzing, calculating, waiting. The air held a subtle tension, the kind that hummed beneath the surface, quiet but insistent, drawing attention to every sound, every movement, every breath. Emily's fingers lightly traced the edge of the table before her mind racing with questions, possibilities, and the unspoken weight of the encounter. She could hear the faint hum of electronics in the room, the occasional distant car on wet streets below, and each sound seemed amplified by the stillness that surrounded them, a soft drumbeat keeping time with her pulse. Derek's presence filled the room without effort, a measured command that made the space feel both intimate and immense. Every motion he made deliberate, as though the room itself responded to him. He walked slowly to a console displaying documents and images, gesturing toward them without a word, and Emily rose to examine them, curiosity and careful observation intertwining. Each sheet, each photo, told a story of precision, influence, and control, not through force, but through intention, planning, and attention to detail. She noted patterns, subtle connections, and the deliberate placement of elements, a world governed by foresight and awareness rather than chaos. The light shifted with the movement of clouds outside, casting long, soft shadows that traced along the polished floors, emphasizing the order and symmetry of the space. And Emily felt a strange comfort in the predictability of it, a reassurance that there was method in the control surrounding her. Derek finally spoke, voice low and measured. Understanding comes not from seeing alone, but from observing and reflecting, and the words settled in her mind, drawing her focus deeper into the details before her, inviting her to connect the pieces, to appreciate the rhythm and logic of this meticulously curated world. She studied each element, aware that her attention was being noticed, that the subtle reactions of her eyes, the tilt of her head, the shifting of her weight, all were observed and accounted for, yet without pressure, without intrusion, only a quiet encouragement to engage. Outside, the drizzle softened, the city lights stretching into gentle reflections on the glass, creating a soft glow that washed over the room, and Emily felt herself slowly adjusting to the rhythm of this environment, a blend of external storm and internal clarity. Derek's hands remained loosely at his sides, a subtle signal of openness and expectation, and Emily recognized that her journey into this space was ongoing, that each moment, each glance, each observation built upon the last, shaping her awareness and understanding, guiding her through a narrative of intention, focus, and the quiet but undeniable gravity of presence, where every decision, every thought, and every step mattered in a story that was as much about perception as it was about the unfolding events surrounding her. Emily Carter lingered near the large windows, the city sprawling below in a tapestry of lights and reflections, rain fading into a gentle drizzle that left the streets glistening like molten glass. Derek Blackwell stood nearby, still and poised, his eyes scanning both her and the view with equal measure, a subtle indication of focus and awareness that seemed to encompass everything in the room. The soft hum of the building provided a quiet rhythm beneath the faint sound of traffic far below, and Emily felt a growing sense of anticipation as she took in the space around her. The minimalist furnishings arranged with deliberate symmetry, the polished floors reflecting light in precise angles, and the air carrying the faint scent of leather and wood, grounding her senses. She traced her fingers along the edge of the table, absorbing the weight of presence, influence, and careful control that seemed woven into every element of the room. Derek's voice broke the quiet, measured and low, yet resonant. Perception is more than observation. It is the understanding of connection, and Emily felt the gravity of his words settle in her mind, compelling her to look deeper at the documents and displays he had gestured toward, recognizing patterns, strategies, and intentions that extended far beyond the visible surfaces. She noted the subtle interplay of light and shadow across the walls, the careful placement of objects suggesting forethought, awareness, and the orchestration of a controlled environment where every detail mattered. Emily's breath came steadily, though her pulse quickened with the awareness that her presence and reactions were acknowledged, measured, and considered in the silent exchange with Derek, whose posture remained relaxed yet commanding, a study in quiet authority. The city beyond the glass appeared almost abstract, its moving lights softened by the residual rainfall, reflecting a world both familiar and alien, reinforcing the sense of stepping into a narrative larger than her own previous experience. Derek moved slowly around the room, each motion deliberate, unobtrusive, yet powerful in the subtle influence it imparted on the space. And Emily observed the rhythm of his movement, noticing how he seemed attuned to both the environment and to her perception, guiding without forcing, presenting without demanding. She focused on connecting the visual cues, the arrangement of materials, and the ambient sounds into a cohesive understanding of the world she had entered, recognizing that awareness and careful attention were essential to navigating the space effectively. The quiet intensity of the room and Derek's steady presence created a current of anticipation, a delicate tension that suggested depth, responsibility, and insight waiting to be grasped. Emily's mind pieced together the elements she had seen, understanding that each choice she made, each observation she recorded internally, contributed to a growing comprehension of the complex balance of influence, control, and measured interaction that defined this environment. She realized that the unfolding moments would challenge her perception, deepen her engagement, and heighten her awareness, drawing her into a story of subtle power, deliberate design, and the quiet but compelling weight of responsibility that occupied the space alongside her. Each heartbeat attuned to the rhythm of understanding and discovery, and she knew that what came next would shape not only her view of this world, but the connection she was forming with the man guiding her through it. Emily Carter sat quietly in the chair near the window, her fingers resting lightly on her knees as the city stretched below, lights shimmering on wet streets that reflected the fading drizzle. Derek Blackwell remained standing, a silent sentinel, eyes tracing both her reactions and the distant skyline, moving with effortless control and a calm precision that seemed to organize the space around him. The room felt charged with a quiet tension, a delicate rhythm that pulsed in sync with her heartbeat, drawing her awareness to every subtle sound. The soft hum of the climate system, the faint creak of polished floors, and the occasional distant siren. She studied the arrangement of the furniture, the alignment of artwork on the walls, the deliberate spacing of objects that suggested purpose and careful thought, recognizing the subtle cues of order and attention to detail that defined this environment. Derek's voice finally broke the silence. Low, measured, deliberate. Focus and understanding are born from reflection, not haste. And Emily felt the weight of his words settle into her consciousness, guiding her perception toward nuance and awareness. She observed the documents and displays he had indicated, noting patterns, connections, and subtleties in the layout, appreciating the foresight embedded in every element, understanding that power here was exercised through attention, patience, and the orchestration of subtle influence rather than overt force. Her breath came slowly, evenly, as she allowed herself to absorb the scale of responsibility and control present. The room itself a reflection of meticulous order and intention, the environment echoing the qualities she was beginning to recognize in Derek himself. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle mist, light from the city scattering across wet streets and puddles, creating a soft luminescence that illuminated the contours of the room and highlighted the symmetry and precision of its design. Emily's awareness deepened as she noted Derek's posture, the slight shift of his weight, the movement of his hands, all communicating attention, expectation, and quiet guidance. She realized that every choice she made, every glance, every subtle reaction contributed to the ongoing dialogue of perception and understanding that was unfolding between them, and that the space was as much a teacher as the man guiding her through it. The soft sound of rainfall outside harmonized with the calm hum of the building, creating a backdrop that allowed her to reflect, absorb, and engage with the environment and the unfolding narrative of control, observation, and deliberate action. Each moment stretched, rich with anticipation and insight, and Emily felt the growing recognition that her journey here required careful attention, thoughtful engagement, and a willingness to understand the intricacies of influence and subtle authority, shaping not only her perception of the space, but her awareness of the person who navigated it with such measured grace. Every detail of the room, every nuance of movement, every soft sound contributing to a layered understanding of the environment and the quiet, compelling gravity of presence that Derek maintained as she prepared for the next step in this unfolding narrative. Emily Carter felt a subtle tension in the room as Derek Blackwell moved closer to the central console, his presence commanding yet unhurried, a quiet rhythm that seemed to synchronize with her own heartbeat. The soft light from the city outside filtered through the rain-speckled windows, casting long, diffused shadows across the floor, highlighting the deliberate symmetry of the furnishings and the subtle placement of objects that suggested both order and purpose. She traced her eyes along the edges of the sleek furniture, the carefully curated artwork, and the polished surfaces, noting the attention to detail that reflected the mindset of the man beside her. Derek's gaze flicked to her, measuring, assessing, yet patient, allowing her the space to absorb the intricacies of the environment while subtly guiding her focus toward the displays of documents and visuals he had arranged. Each item told a story, revealing strategy, foresight, and controlled influence, and Emily realized that the lessons in observation and understanding were embedded not only in the materials themselves, but in the way the space was orchestrated to convey them. Her breathing deepened, in rhythm with the subtle hum of the building, as she considered the connections, the patterns, the choices that were reflected in every detail, feeling both curiosity and a growing sense of awareness. Derek spoke again, his voice low, precise, carrying the weight of experience without commanding it. True comprehension comes when you recognize the subtle interplay of action and consequence. And Emily felt the words settle into her consciousness, guiding her thoughts toward a deeper engagement with the environment and the narrative unfolding around her. The faint scent of polished wood and a trace of cologne filled the room, grounding her senses even as her mind traced the complex structures of intention and design present in every surface and arrangement. She noticed the way light glimmered across the reflective floors, creating a rhythm of illumination and shadow that emphasized the depth and balance of the space, reinforcing the sense of order and the meticulous control Derek exercised. Emily's pulse quickened slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation, a heightened awareness that each movement, each glance, each subtle shift in the environment or in Derek's posture carried meaning and required thoughtful engagement. Outside, the city remained alive, muted by the lingering drizzle, reflections stretching across the wet streets, merging with the calm yet deliberate energy of the room. She felt the weight of presence and perception, understanding that the journey through this carefully orchestrated space demanded attention, observation, and discernment. Derek's hand rested near the edge of the console, an unobtrusive anchor, his eyes following her as she connected the visual cues, internalizing the lessons embedded in both the objects and the silence that surrounded them. Emily realized that each detail, each choice in the arrangement of the space, each measured movement and glance, contributed to a growing comprehension of control, responsibility, and the quiet gravity of influence, and that her awareness, engagement, and reflection would shape the path she navigated in the unfolding story, every moment charged with subtle meaning and potential discovery. Emily Carter took a slow, deliberate breath as the room settled into quiet stillness, the faint hum of the building blending with the soft patter of lingering rain against the windows. Derek Blackwell remained nearby, his presence steady, composed, and commanding without overt assertion, allowing her space to absorb the details of the environment while subtly guiding her attention. The polished marble floors reflected the city lights outside, creating elongated patterns that stretched across the minimalist furniture, emphasizing the deliberate order and symmetry of the room. Emily's eyes traced the edges of the carefully curated objects, the placement of artwork, and the subtle lighting that highlighted the contours of the space, each element reinforcing a sense of intentional design and thoughtful control. Derek gestured toward a side console where documents and visuals were meticulously arranged, and she moved closer, absorbing the patterns, connections, and implications embedded within the materials, feeling a growing understanding of the underlying structure and purpose. The soft scent of leather and polished wood hung in the air, grounding her senses as she observed the interplay of light and shadow, the careful orchestration of space, and the rhythm of subtle cues that spoke of strategy, influence, and deliberate action. She noted how each step she took was mirrored by his measured attention, the quiet observation that encouraged reflection without pressure, and she felt the subtle tension of awareness building, a connection between perception and presence that drew her deeper into the unfolding narrative. Outside, the rain had slowed further, leaving a glossy sheen on the streets below that reflected the city lights in soft, diffused patterns, a muted mirror of the ordered environment within. Derek's voice broke the silence, low and deliberate. Every observation is a choice, and every choice shapes the path forward. And Emily felt the weight of his words as she internalized the significance of attentiveness, focus, and comprehension in navigating this carefully constructed space. Her pulse matched the subtle rhythm of the room, the measured calm of Derek's movements providing a framework within which she could analyze, reflect, and anticipate. She explored the documents and displays, connecting the dots, seeing relationships and foresight woven into the details, and realized that the environment itself was both a teacher and a reflection of the control, precision, and awareness Derek embodied. Each glance, each subtle motion, each shift in posture between them carried unspoken communication, a dialogue of presence and attention that required her full engagement. Emily's awareness expanded, understanding that the room, the objects, the lighting, and the patterns of movement were not merely aesthetic but functional, conveying lessons of strategy, perception, and the weight of decision. The quiet intensity between them settled into a rhythm, a shared acknowledgement of purpose and observation, and she knew that the unfolding moments were not simply about seeing, but about understanding, participating, and absorbing the depth of the environment and the subtle authority of the man guiding her through it, every second building toward insight, awareness, and the choices that would define the path she was now walking. Emily Carter stood by the window, the soft glow of the city lights painting gentle reflections across the polished floor, rain having almost ceased, leaving the streets below glossy and illuminated. Derek Blackwell remained poised nearby, his presence steady and commanding, yet patient, each movement calculated to allow observation without constraint. She felt the culmination of the journey through the rooms, the hallway, the lounge, each step designed to convey purpose, awareness, and the gravity of attention, and now the space itself seemed to pause, as if holding its breath for the next revelation. Emily's gaze swept over the documents, the displays, and the subtle patterns embedded in the environment, understanding that every choice, every alignment, every detail had been curated to impart lessons of strategy, perception, and silent authority. Derek finally spoke, voice low and deliberate. Everything leads to understanding, and understanding allows choice, and the weight of his words resonated within her, folding together all she had absorbed, the rhythm of observation, the quiet intensity of presence, and the careful orchestration of space and influence. She traced her eyes over the skyline one last time, the wet streets reflecting lights in, a fractured brilliance that mirrored the complexity of the journey she had taken through both the building and the unfolding awareness of Derek's world. Her breath was steady now, measured, attuned to the quiet hum of the environment, and she sensed the subtle invitation to consider her own place within this narrative of control, awareness, and responsibility. Every glance Derek cast, every movement, every pause held significance, guiding her attention toward nuance, encouraging reflection, and fostering engagement with the layers of meaning present in both the environment and the lessons implicit in the arrangement of objects, lighting, and spatial rhythm. Emily felt a quiet anticipation for what was to come, a recognition that the culmination of observation and understanding was not an endpoint, but a threshold to deeper insight, a space where her awareness, attentiveness, and reflection would shape the decisions ahead. The room, the city beyond, and the measured presence of Derek combined into a harmonious tension, a quiet but compelling force that demanded engagement and mindfulness, and she realized that every second she spent in this space contributed to a growing comprehension of influence, perception, and the deliberate exercise of authority. The soft residual scent of rain mingled with polished wood and subtle hints of leather, anchoring her senses, while the patterns of light, shadow, and reflection reinforced the intricacy of the environment and the care embedded in each element. As Derek gestured toward the expansive view, allowing her to take in the full scale of the city and the world he navigated with such deliberate precision, Emily felt a subtle shift, a recognition of the continuity of presence, the cumulative understanding of observation, and the invitation to move forward with awareness, curiosity, and the sense that this moment, while concluding the immediate journey, was opening a door to the ongoing story. Each choice and observation from this point forward, poised to shape both her perception and her path within the intricate, measured, and compelling world she had entered.